Holy Toledo, I'm back again. So, so somehow something got disconnected from my end. The little technology elves. I think they're telling me I need to be going to YouTube with this and as opposed to Facebook Live, but I can't get to it. So I'm going to finish up my thought here um, regarding the attachment system and intersubjectivity. So let me tell you how the brain works and how it's supposed to work. The brain, all brain cells, brain networks, develop based on the principle of we build what we use. Whenever we use a brain system, it gets stronger, more efficient, um, more efficient, more effective, more sensitive. That's called use-dependent development. If you want to learn to play the piano, you just play the piano a lot, and you practice. It grooves in the channels for that. So now, when a child is out there, he falls down, scrapes their knee, and get dysregulated from all the pain, their motivation system goes back to the parent, jumps on mommy's lap, crying, all this emotional dysregulation, physical dysregulation. They're all crying. The mother goes into a nice sort of rhythmic, oh, sweetie, nurturing kind of tone. And so the child's nervous system is all chaotic and disorganized. The parent enters with a nice rhythmic organized system down below. And through that intersubjectivity system, through the connection system, through the mirror neurons, the child imports the nervous system of their mother or the parent into their brain networks. And so they have disorganized networks and they have an organized parent in the parent networks. And that allows the child then to use that as a template for reorganizing their brain networks. That's how nurture works. So the child jumps up in the lap, parent goes, oh, sweetie. The child re-regulates, jumps off, and goes back to play. That's how it's supposed to work. And in that process, all of the brain cells that went from disorganized to an organized state, all of those transitional brain cells got stronger. They got stronger, more efficient, and more sensitive because the parent used them. They call it scaffolding. The parent helped the child use those brain networks to re-regulate, and so they get stronger. You do it once, you do it twice, you do it 5,000 times. The child now has the internalized capacity to self-regulate. So you get an 8 or 9-year-old child, they get hurt about something, go into a disorganized state, but they already have all the transition networks built to get to re-regulate and get to self-soothe. And so those breach and repair sequences are critical to developing the child's capacity for self-regulation. Kohut calls it optimal frustration. We don't want to like go too far because then the child can't regulate. But we want to present some stress to the child and then help them re-regulate and stress, help them. It's like building a muscle. You go to the gym, every time you work out, you rip a muscle a little bit, not too much, just enough, and then it rebuilds stronger because that's how the brain systems are designed to work. So the protest behavior, the child's protest behavior, is when the child encounters a developmental task that they are not able to accomplish on their own, their brains go into a disorganized state. They are designed to emit a protest behavior. The disorganized emotions or disorganized behavior to elicit the involvement of a more mature nervous system to help the child regain regulation and build all those regulatory networks for that process. So protest behavior is designed to elicit the involvement of the caregiver. That's how the brain works. That's what it's supposed to be doing, except with this court-involved pathology. With this custody attachment pathology, The child is protest behavior is designed to sever the parent-child bond. That's not how the brain works. That's not how protest behavior works. That's how spousal attachment systems work. That is an artificial attachment system. If the child can be angry at the parent for the empathic breach, but then you restore the empathic field, the intersubjective field, and the child bonds right back in again, okay? Because the child's set goal is always there. And so that's how it's supposed to work. There's a breach in the relationship, and then you fix it. Breach and repair. Ed Tronick has a YouTube up where he talks about the still phase studies and the breach and repair sequence. He introduces that. Couple of things to note. He says he's done this for 40 years. Yeah. So he's giving you the paradigm for what they do on this. He didn't do that for 40 years. I mean, he kept evolving it and getting better and better. He'll put one camera on the mother, one camera on the child, and microanalyze frame by frame what's going on in their relationship. So we have a lot of knowledge about the breach and repair sequence and about how to repair the breach and repair sequence. So first thing to note is he said he's been doing this for 40 years. So we know a lot. The second thing to notice is at the end where he calls it the good, the bad, and the ugly. The good is that normal everyday breach and repair sequence that you see at the start of a still phase, where mom and the child are kind of, sometimes they're joining, sometimes they're breaching, and it's just breach and repair sequence. The bad is when mom goes still phase. Now there's that empathic failure. And just going still phase, look how devastating that is for the child. When you watch that child with the mom still face and the child's going through all that distress, that's what a child feels in a breached attachment bond. So now we have children who have a breached attachment bond to a mom or a dad in the family courts. So I know for a fact that their brain is going through that intensity of a grief response, because that's how the brain works. So I have that little child protesting in there. I have that in every single one of these kids. I don't care what they're presenting on the surface because of the parents' psychological control and the pathology they've induced. I know within their brain they have a massive grief response. And I would ask any of the involved psychologists out there, these ignorant forensic people, where is the child's grief response? You have a child rejecting a parent, gets breaching that. Where is it's nowhere to be seen. That's not an authentic child. We got so much pain in that child. And what happens for that child is that's an authentic grief response, but they misattribute it. They misattribute. They think it's something bad that the targeted parent is doing. It must be doing something bad. I'm hurting. And the allied parent convinces them of that as well. Oh, they're being bad to you. So it's a misattribution of the grief response. And that's why, a workshop like the High Road or something can recover these kids so quickly, is because the child, the authentic child, is still right there. The moment we get that attachment bond, the grief response goes down and disappears. And so then we can get them an accurate attribution of the causality. It was because you weren't fixing things. The problem for the child becomes if the child exposes their authenticity, they're going to get massive retaliation from the pathological parent, it's withering retaliation from the pathological parent. So we must first be able to protect the child from the psychological abuse of the allied parent before we can ask the child to reveal their authenticity again on that. So the protest behavior, Ed Tronick at the end. The third thing, the good, the bad, and the ugly. The ugly is not repairing the attachment bond. That is the worst possible thing we can do is leave an attachment bond unrepaired. Watch Edtronic, the good, the bad, and the ugly. We just leave that child with all those nasty feelings inside of them without a repair. And because the protest behavior is designed to elicit the involvement, and so that we get the breach and repair sequence and thereby build all the brain networks for repairing relationships, that's not happening. So the child's brain network, the child is not learning how to repair a breached relationship. So they will either never leave an inflamed intersubjective field called enmeshment, which is what we have with a live parent, the enmeshed relationship where they don't breach, or if there's a breach, they don't have the capacity for repair. And so that's the pathological, that's a narcissistic borderline. They can't, because and the central feature is the sadness. They don't know how to process sadness because it's processed through the attachment networks, through the nurture, through this breach and repair sequence. And so the sadness will crash their nervous system, their love and bonding system. So as a clinical psychologist involved with or expert in attachment pathology, for me to come over to the family courts and see the abject ignorance of the psychologists over here, these forensic psychologists who believe persecutory delusions, who don't know anything about the breach and repair sequence, who don't know anything about how to fix anything with it. And so they're believing a false pathology, a factitious disorder imposed on another. And they don't care. They've been doing this for 40 years and nothing. That's, let's see, how much time do I have here? A couple of minutes. And that's because your families have been isolated. The pathology is dangerous, it's retaliatory, it's vengeful, and clinical psychologists, if we try to change anything, they're going to retaliate against us. They have an attorney. The attorney and the opposing counsel wants to destroy our credibility through any means possible. And they're the attorney for a pathological parent who's got delusions and persecutory delusions and very vengeful. This is a dangerous pathology. So clinical psychologists, we don't want to put our license on the line for you. You're too dangerous. We went to graduate school for 4 years. We did a year of supervised pre-doc internship. We did a year of post-doc supervised internship. And then we sat for our license exam. And now you're asking us to put all of that on the line because you married a narcissistic or borderline personality person. No, that's my license, that's my job, that's my career, that's my family income, that's everything. Why should I put that on the line? I shouldn't. Autism doesn't make me put my license on the line. ADHD doesn't make me put eating disorders, substance, no other pathology abuses us as psychologists, the family courts do. And so it's a passive aggressive thing. If you're going to threaten our license, we just won't come. So that's what we did. We stopped coming. We stopped treating. We gave you your own special psychologists, forensic psychologists, and then just basically abandoned you to them. Now, the hope at the time was that these forensic psychologists would be good and solve things because they're specialists. And no, they didn't. The danger of the pathology means that all the good psychologists go somewhere else. We don't want to work with this. It's intractable. The courts are too slow. The courts are a problem. It's just we view it as a not fixable pathology in the family courts. And so we just stay away. And the ones who come into the family courts, there's no hope that they're going to be able to fix the family. And they know that the parents are going to stay this way forever, narcissistic borderline pathology. And so why are they working here? For the money. That's the only reason they come, is for the money. They do these big puffy And that's where it's just ballooned, these assessments, $20,000 to $40,000, 6 to 9 months, because they can. We could return a clinical diagnostic assessment 4 to 6 weeks for around $5,000 with a second opinion, and they're charging $30,000 that they can't get a second opinion on it. They don't diagnose the pathology. They don't offer a treatment plan. And it takes them 6 to 9 months where they just kind of leisurely go on through their assessment of possible child abuse because they can. And so they're just totally exploiting the families over here for financial. And I'll cite the last 40 years. They haven't fixed anything. Have you heard them talk about cross-generational coalitions or emotional cutoffs? Or no, not till I got here. How about delusional disorder? No. How about the attachment system? No, nothing. They're not talking about anything until I get here, and I have to educate them. Behavioral psychology, applied behavioral analysis, stimulus control. No, they don't care. They do not care. They should be doing a mental status exam. They should be doing the brief psychiatric rating scale for all these families. Let's get a 7-point rating on anger and suspiciousness and depression and unusual thought content. Let's BPRS. Let's get if they want to do something, get a Roberts apperception test for children. Let's take a look at how the child's doing. They don't. They just do MMPIs and stuff that show nothing, but it pads their bottom line of their billing and makes it appear they're doing some sort of testing, but they're not. So that's I'm going to wrap up here, but that's my two-part take on what's happening with the attachment system over here. It is a false attachment pathology. Children do not reject normal range parents. They don't even reject abusive parents. It creates a disorganized attachment. And so I challenge the stupid forensic psychologist, tell me what the attachment system is of everybody in the family and what the attachment category is. They won't be able to do it because it's a false attachment pathology. They'll be going, there's no category for this. And yeah, there's no category for this because that's not how the brain works. If there's concerns about child abuse by the targeted parent, and typically are persecutory delusion, let's get that properly assessed. If the targeted parent's abusive, let's protect the child, put that parenting on the treatment plan, fix it, and restore the breached attachment bond to the formerly abusive parent. That's what we used to do in foster care all the time. The problem is we didn't get a parent who would cooperate with that. That's the problem. But over here in the family courts, holy cow, I've got a targeted parent who wants to cooperate, who wants to bond, who's immensely available. That child should be bonded into that, easy peasy. But they're not, because it's a goal-corrected motivational system with a set goal, except for them. Their set goal is to flee the parent. Another time, I'll talk to you in the future about avoidance conditioning. The training a rat to press a lever, there's two types of punishments, escape conditioning and avoidance conditioning. You turn on a light and then you give the rat a shock. Now, for escape conditioning, you turn on the light and give the shock, and if the rat presses the lever, they can turn off the shock so they can escape the punishment. That's escape conditioning. Avoidance conditioning is you turn on the light, and if the rat presses a lever before the shock, they don't get a shock. That's avoidance. They can avoid the shock by pressing the lever, by doing a behavior. If you get avoidant conditioning, that will stay forever. That will never extinguish, that will never stop, because the rat will never try. And you show the light, they'll never say, I wonder if I still get a shock. They don't do that. You show them the light and they press the lever. And they will do that forever. You will not get extinguished on avoidance conditioning. We know that. So the moment the child is allowed to avoid the stress and the discomfort of being with the targeted parent, you will never get rid of that symptom. You're now reinforcing the child's avoidance of the stimulus. So I'll talk about that someday. Oh my God, we should not be reinforcing avoidance conditioning. do a proper risk assessment. Is that a dangerous parent? If that's not a dangerous parent, then we need to put it on a treatment plan with goals, outcome measures, interventions, and timeframes for estimating goal accomplishment. And so parents need a treatment plan. For that, you'll need a diagnosis. For that, you'll need a proper assessment. The pathology of concern is possible child abuse by the targeted projected parent. If so, the physical abuse, sexual abuse, neglect, psychological abuse, define what it is. Let's put it on a treatment plan and fix it. Or possible child of psychological abuse by the allied narcissistic borderline dark parent who is creating a shared persecutory delusion and a false attachment pathology in the child for secondary gain of manipulating the court's decisions around child custody or revenge and retaliation, or to maintain a regulatory object in the child. So with that, I'm going to head off to my day and see what we can accomplish for the rest of Sunday here. All right, take care. Bye-bye.